Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to everyone on our 12th episode of our Thought Leadership series. We do this every last Thursday of the month. Interweave is a professional diversity consulting organization that offers a range of services to help organizations foster diversity, equity, and inclusion at the workplace. Our services include a suite of offering in POSH, DEI consulting, audits, women leadership programs, offered in form of training, e-learning, art, and theatre. You can reach us at mira@interweave.in or visit our website www.interweave.in for any help or info on our offerings. Before we get into today's session, two important points for our participants. One, please type your questions in the comment sections and we will definitely take it towards the end. There is a CC, closed caption, on all the platforms available. You can enable or disable them as per your need. Today, we have an exciting panel talking about navigating the intersectional barriers in women's work life at the workplace. And for this, I would like to welcome my colleague, Wing Commander Navdeep, to take on this conversation with our impaneled guest today. Over to you, Navdeep. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this Thursday afternoon conversation. I am Wing Commander Navdeep Parmar. My rank may not be familiar, so maybe Lieutenant Colonel is more familiar. The equivalent rank in the Army is called Lieutenant Colonel, and in the Indian Air Force, it's called Wing Commander. So, one more time, good afternoon. I'm Wing Commander Navdeep Parmar, and I'm retired Air Force officer. I am excited about this topic today because there's a lot of conversation around glass ceiling, but there are very few conversations around what if the glass ceiling is actually made up of two layers of glass. And that is an interesting conversation. I want to acknowledge that each one of us, every single human being, has multiple identities, and that we stand at the intersection of those identities. For example, one could stand at the intersection of being a woman, a veteran, disabled, age, or socioeconomic background. So all these identities create experiences in our personal life, in society, and in the workplaces. So for today's conversations, we're going to narrow down our focus and we want to talk about how these intersectional barriers affect women and what organizations are doing about it. This is a very powerful conversation, and to have this thought-provoking conversation, we have a very powerful panel. I would welcome our panelists. Please meet Jyotsna Malhotra. Captain Jyotsna Malhotra is a veteran with global exposure in L&D, talent management, organizational development, recruitment, and employer branding. She is head of employee engagement, diversity, and inclusion at TVS Motors for last 4 years. Please meet.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Please meet Melenar Annie Kolo. And Melenar is a senior vice president at Northern Trust, and she heads the diversity, equity, and inclusion for Northern Trust.
Thrilled to be here. Hello, everyone.
And last but not the least, please meet Pallavi Sharma. She is Associate Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Bridspan Group. She has 20 years of experience in talent development, and for the last 3 years has been in the DEI space. She identifies as a queer, and her pronouns are she, her, and hers.
Hi, welcome everyone.
So before we get on to the conversation, uh, please use the chat function to ask the questions that you wish I was asking. Ask questions that you want to clarify, anything, please use the chat function. So let's get right into it. I will get our first question to Pallavi. Pallavi, can you share about your intersectionality?
Sure. Thanks, Navdeep. Glad and thrilled to be here. And I think, like Navdeep mentioned, I think the most stark identities are, me as a woman and as a queer woman. But there are other aspects as well, of my intersectionality, and which is, having grown up in a very multicultural environment, I do not feel like, sorry, I belong to like a particular place. And I think Navdeep, you and Jyotsna, you might identify with it with your, armed forces background. But my father was used to work in a bank, and so I have grown up in a lot of different states. And so if somebody tries to, put me in a specific box, like am I a North Indian, am I like, from a particular city, I truly am not. Like I do feel like very Indian in that sense. And another aspect of my identity is also like, an older woman who has no children, or somebody in their mid 40s without kids. And if you see, like, these are all aspects of, these are all minorities, like, in our country, and especially like being a queer woman. I mean, there is no data, but we know that from experience, and, also especially the fact that you don't have a regular, family slash children, those aspects. And I think people usually notice like one part of me, which is usually my gender, or it sometimes now with my grace could also be my age, and make assumptions, that a woman this age must have a family and a husband and and children. And so I usually try and build that into my introduction, about my queer identity, and also, talk about the fact that I have grown up like in a very multicultural environment. So that was like, my intersectionality that I would call out.
No, yeah, yeah, and that's lot of you're standing at the intersection of lot of roads. I see that. Yeah. So I and now this is a personal experience, and I come to you, Melanie. And why do you think it's important for organizations to recognize this and address this intersectionality of women in their DEI initiatives?
So thank you, Navdeep, and thank you everyone for joining in. I'm thrilled to be here as a part of this discussion. My co-panelist Pallavi helped me answer the first question. The fact that we're all different and no human being exists in silos. So Pallavi spoke about her intersectional identities, not too different from mine. It's just that people make assumptions about my age. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. They don't when I color my gray hairs. But other than that, my other intersectional identities include the fact that I'm single, I'm heterosexual, I'm an ally for the community, I'm a caregiver, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter. So that's my definition of intersectionality personally. Why should organizations embrace it? One is, like I said, none of us exist in silence. The second piece is the fact that we speak so much about the business case for gender diversity. There's also the economic case. And I was reading a very interesting article. By just improving our labor workforce participation by 10%, we could have had X trillion dollars to our GDP. And I think the other piece is that you can't just have it by hiring women who are maybe similar to Navdeep, Jyotsna, Pallavi, and myself. We need to look at the wider strata in our community. And how do we do that? How do we embrace those intersectional differences? I think the second piece is there's something called gender intelligence, the fact that the male and the female brain is wired differently, and it develops differently. And how it translates into work is that the way men and women interact with each other, the way they lead teams, I'm not saying one is better than the other. For us to be truly successful, we need to leverage this gender intelligence. And we can leverage this gender intelligence when we truly respect the intersectionality that each human brings to the table. My third piece is we speak so much about diversity, inclusion, belonging. We use these terms interchangeably. We also talk about equity. We have these in our fancy titles. But the point is, when we look at important processes that impact women in the organization, if it's your appraisals, if it is your development, it is your compensation, are we looking at things from an equitable lens when it comes to looking at women with intersectional differences? I'm talking about a woman with a disability, or a woman from an LGBTQ community, or a woman from a disadvantaged social economic background. And these are areas where we need to respectfully have that dialogue with the managers and say, have you factored these differences? So the third lens is equity. And I think finally, just like men, we all go through different stages in our human life cycle and our employee life cycle. So you have maternity, you have promotion, you have leadership, and we all experience bias. And I very often see, bias can be eradicated and can be eliminated. That, that means you don't have a brain if you say you're going to eradicate bias. I think we need to acknowledge we're all biased. How do
Yes.
we be aware of some bias is good, by the way, but how do we need to be aware of this bias and what are we going to do about it? And I think that's important, especially for women on maternity. When women are being looked at for leadership roles, no, the
Yeah.
person's not, the person is too nice, the person is too aggressive. Yeah, how do we educate both our women and men on these biases? So these are some of the things that we need to keep in mind when we embrace an intersectional workforce. And I think we need to move on. So I'm going to pass the baton on to you back, Navdeep. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Yes, that was beautiful. So I see that we don't live in silos. So if we don't live in silos, and the other component is that we are a lot of like men and women are wired differently. So our experiences are different. So I'm going back to Pallavi. So if the Pallavi, how have your multiple identities shaped your experiences, or how have they created challenges for you in the society and in the workplace?
Yes, and I think even before I speak about like my challenges, I just want to take a minute and acknowledge that uh, the I have been in a very privileged position when it comes to especially being queer in India, in the sense that I have had extreme like good acceptance from whether it is my family or my partner's family or our near and dear ones, or even at the workplace. So, and especially when it comes to the workplaces, I think the discrimination is not very upfront. It is, I think people have sort of become a little bit more sensitive thanks to like, these kind of conversations that we are having at workplaces. However, like I just want to like narrate a few anecdotes and incidents that have been, maybe were unintentional, but I think sometimes we miss out and we have not yet normalized some of these things. So recently, like I was part of a session which was just a regular, like an insurance company who we were partnering with had come to speak about like what are the benefits and who all are covered as part of this insurance. And they constantly spoke about like this is for your spouse and this is for your you know in-laws will or will not be included. And I had to interject and sort of ask like, is that does that also cover same-sex partners? And there was like an awkward silence, and then he mumbled something, then he moved on, and then I had to again put it in the chat, like it was a Zoom session, and ask that question again. And again, I did not have a very clear response, but something like, "Let me check and get back," which sort of like makes me feel unseen. Like it just makes me feel like, oh, okay, this is not something that is on top of their mind even now. Um, and so, and another
Yeah.
instance was, uh, you know, also, like being, I think, a queer couple or a woman or a lesbian couple, I have been in a same-sex relationship for now 10 years. And because there is no marriage associated with us, and it has become, it's a very small thing, but when I talk about my partner's parents, like it is still not the same as a head couple talking about, or a person talking about their in-laws. So it is so much more acceptable for a person to say, oh, my mother-in-law is not keeping well, so I need to take time off, or my
Yeah,
father-in-law is in the hospital, so I need this urgently. So I have even, so when I was in the same situation, it is to tell people that, oh, my partner's mom is unwell. Um, I even had somebody ask me that, oh, can their daughter not take care of them? So that is a very, experience that you would never ask that to a normal, or a, not normal, but this head cup woman, like when she's talking about her in-laws. And
yeah.
so, these are probably like very not thought of. And just
Mm,
one last, incident, which was very recent, and also in the same lines, like, what Melina spoke about. So between my last job and my current job, I took a sabbatical. I took the sabbatical also because I was moving to a new city, to Mumbai. I was in Bangalore for a large amount of time, and I was moving the city to be with my partner because we were wanted to support her aging parents. And but when I was looking for a job, I this reason was not enough, like which was not good enough, because it was not a maternity break. It was something that the recruiters, I think, found very hard to wrap their brains around, to say that, oh, you moved here for your partner and taking care of her parents. And I don't think so. A same question will be asked to a cishet woman. And this happens all the time, right? Women get married and move cities for their husbands. And we just completely like take it as a absolute, acceptable reason. So there are
yeah,
these like small instances which are sort of work related but also personal. And I think a lot of things. This is not just specific to being a woman, but in the whole LGBTQ world, a lot of societal restrictions. There are no basic rights of, bank cannot open a joint bank account. Adoption is difficult. Financial transactions, till this date, we can't gift each other a large amount of money because it will be taxed, because we are not related on paper. Renting a place, and generally, like, introducing ourselves as partners when we meet strangers. So I think that is like, sums up like what my challenges have been so far.
yeah. Sounds like every step of the way, Pallavi. Yeah, yeah. But I'm also glad that there are power and privileges. Some of us have those power and privileges, and I have to acknowledge that to be able to come and share this perspective, it will really help a lot of people understand this very, very important burning topic that we are trying to understand. Yeah. So this is from your personal experience, and I say the recruiter who could not understand, or the organizations could not make wrap their head around as to why would you move for your partner. So uh, from that perspective, Pallavi, and why do you think that organizations need to understand intersectionality of women?
I think yes. So my perspective, and again, carrying forward that same example. So I have also been in a talent development role, where I was leading this initiative for women returning back to work from a break. And I saw, like, a lot of focus. This was in partnership with our recruitment team. A lot of focus were on the women who were returning to work from the maternity leave, and that became like the preferred women as well. And why not like other women who have been away for other reasons which have kept them away? And especially, I think one of the things that I have a lot of women who are single mothers, and I feel like newly single mothers is also an intersectionality that we really need to focus on, because it could be they have gone through a very bad separation, and now they have this responsibility of taking care of a, could be a grown up child, but it is a reality, and it is something that we do not really, we sort of quickly move on when we don't see what we are just, like with just one focus. We want to just only focus on, oh, have you been on maternity leave and you want to come back? I have seen that happen a lot. I think we only look at, oh, the woman should have been away only for 6 months. And then we can get them back, or maximum a year. I think those kind of restraints and restrictions are not really helping us, because we need to look beyond that as well. And in my case, I experienced it in a different way. So I think as organizations, we really need to look at an intersectional lens when it comes to women. I, as a person, when I am seen as a whole with all of these different intersectionalities that I bring, I definitely feel more belonged. I think the sense of belonging is far more when we are addressing or acknowledging all of these different aspects. I think, yeah, that's.
Yeah. Now, I think the belongingness factor will only come when I am acknowledged as who I am in the entirety, and
Yes.
not just as one person who knows DEI or some person who can do project management, but also understanding, like you said, of being a single person who's raising a child. And,
Yes.
so Melanie, if I can come back to you, are there any specific initiatives or programs that you believe have been particularly effective in promoting intersectionality in the organizations?
Sure. Thank you, Navdeep, for that question. And thank you, Pallavi. I just loved what you said. Thank you for your personal courage in sharing so much with us. So I think the first thing is, when we said human beings, we don't exist in silos. No man exists on an island as well. And I think in all of the work we do in DNI, one of the groups that are most powerful at the workplace are our employee networks, or what we call employee resource groups. So we can share examples of some of the work that our ERGs have done to bring intersectionality to the table. So very
Okay.
recently, when we observed Pride Month, we had our Pride ERG partner with a women's ERG, and we invited a lesbian woman to come in and share her intersectional experience. What does pride mean to her, and what does being a woman mean to her? You know, similarly, may not be necessarily for women and intersectionality, but for Autism Awareness Month, we had a neurodivergent queer entrepreneur come in and share his perspectives of
Yeah.
having ADHD and being queer. So every time we have an event by the ERG, we ask them to think about how they can bring in intersectionality into the conversation. So one way is through our employee networks. I think the second way is, we have these peer learning circles for women. When they go through leadership development programs for women and they graduate, they start their own alumni networks within the workplace. So they meet once a quarter, they invite an external speaker, they do a workshop. But most recently, some women got together to form what's called the Conscious Woman Circle. And this circle is about living in the present, living consciously, and how do we lead with empathy and compassion. Now, the reason I'm sharing this example, Navdeep, with you and the rest of the group is because, I've been a fly on the wall for some of these sessions. And women often share their experiences about being single mothers, about being divorced, about being widows. So we talk about the intersectionality of identity. We also need to talk about the intersectionality of our experiences. And then, being more importantly, we see an increasing number of women being quote unquote unpaid caregivers. The caregiving economy is booming. Yeah.
Yeah.
So these circles bring to life intersection experiences in a psychologically safe space. That was my second example. And the third example that I want to share is when we have senior women leaders come in and talk to others, either through, these role model forums or reverse mentoring, or, via our sponsorship forums. And when they share their experiences, it teaches everyone that we're not alone, that vulnerability is the strength. So when you look at a person, you say, wow, this person has it all. When you listen to their story, you see there's more that meets the eye. And it's about the intersectionality, about their identity, their experience, and how they've led with personal courage. Addressing, I don't like to use the word challenge because it sounds very aggressive. How have they addressed some of those experiences in bringing their whole true selves to work? So I would just say the employee networks, these peer learning circles, and having senior women leaders are three examples we've used to bring to life the conversations around intersectionality. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. That I think is actionable step that anybody can take to create more inclusive environment. Yeah. So this time, Jyotsna, now that we've heard what Northern Trust has done, so at TVS Motors, would you like to share some initiatives or processes or policies that you have put in place for women with disability? Because you've done a lot of work in that area.
Sure. Navdeep, first of all, thank you for inviting us. And I'd like to begin with appreciating Pallavi for coming forward and talking about her own experiences and sharing with us. And I also wish to share here, Pallavi, I think some of the experiences are unique for each one of us, but the world is moving forward very fast. So when we talk about policies, the way they are changing today are amazing. Of benchmark study that we did while launching our second career policy for the women on by the name Unnati. Uh, we discovered that a lot of organizations, especially few of the leading organizations, are not looking at 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, because up to 2 year is not even a gap. If you relocate from one country or from one state to another, 1 year to 2 year is something which will happen if you're moving with family or if you're trying to settle down into a new location. So that's not even considered like a gap. Yeah, but even beyond that is something in which people can go for a second career is an approach that I think many organizations have taken, including us, for a second career program. At the same time, some more examples which are unique. So I heard or read somewhere that in an organization, a woman employee was not able to apply for maternity leave because the database did not had her date of marriage in the system. So this is something to really dwell upon in terms of the way our systems, vintage systems, are tweaked in. So why in today's world we are still living that age where marriage is still a consideration to proceed on maternity leave is a question we all need to challenge ourselves, because that's something that constitution has given us to go ahead and still not get hung up with old practices that were existing in the older times. So considering those practices and bringing a new wave is the way forward, definitely. And it was amazing to hear from both of you, Melina and Pallavi, on this. Talking about TVS Motor Company, we have done various interventions in the diversity sphere of PWD. So today we have more than 200 persons with disability inside of the organization. When we talk about talent, we talk about offering reasonable accommodation. Why? Because each individual is unique, and that's where this intersectionality comes into play. She might be a woman, but she might be a locomotor disability person with disability. He might be a male, but he has sign and hearing and speech disability. So each individual might be different, and that's where this reasonable accommodation comes into play in each individual when we look at intersectionality. At the same time, coming to policies, there are exclusive helplines which exist in the system. There are employee resource group. I think Melanie also spoke about employee resource group. Rather, I want to mention here that one of the sign language interpreter is part of our D&I team. So anytime we have any intervention happening across the organization or any performance management discussion with the sign language interpreter is needed, calendar can be blocked and the individual can be invited for an interaction. Even a software we have brought on board as a pilot, where any individual, any manager can have any meeting at any point of time. Online interpreter is available for them. So when we talk about regular employee engagement, there is data slicing, which is done on intersectionality. So how women who are persons with disability are rating the engagement. engagement scores on intersectionality slicing is done to understand it in a much better manner, that what could be the specific interventions that could be built upon in the existing system. But at the same time, if you ask me, are we writing very specific policies around it? Yes, for PWD, there are specific policies. For women, there are specific policies. But for intersectionality, there are policies where both are applicable and at the same time, reasonable accommodation is also offered. So unconscious bias training happens across the organization for all managers and team members of persons with disability. At the same time, there is a default rating on performance management system for any woman, irrespective of disability or normal woman proceeding on maternity, which is applicable to everyone. Insurance cover, not applicable only for your immediate family, not applicable only for your parents, also applicable to your in-laws. So this is something which takes it one step beyond, the average, where your
Yeah.
in-laws are also feeling proud of what you have as part of being an employee of an organization. Hybrid working policy is applicable to all of them. There are shuttle bus services, there is point-to-point drop services which are available. There's on request logistics support which can be offered to them. There is a concierge desk which is available inside the factory where they can request for any kind of provision that they required. It could be a PAN card, it could be a driving license, it could be anything that they need help with. There are permissions which can be availed for coming late in the morning or going early in the evening, depending on what is their requirement. So those can be accommodated to ensure that their personal management is taken care of. There are infrastructure audits. So today we are 80% PWD enabled inside of the organization. But is that enough? We cannot say with guarantee, because the kind of disabilities that we are looking at, we are not only looking at wheelchair friendliness, we are not only looking at having signages and light signages and boards around us. We are also looking at locomotor disability. So there might be a ramp, but is the ramp enabled enough to take everyone along the path of reaching the canteen? It's a challenge, and that's why every year an infrastructure audit helps us identify if there are certain challenges which can still be overcome to ensure that everybody is taken care of. At the same time, there is a reserved parking lot for persons with disability. There are hostel facilities with food available. Those who want to avail, they can come to factory, and near factory premises, there are facilities available along with logistics support. At the same time, there is a policy called Incluvers, which looks at PWD progression into the system. So when they join the organization, they join at a certain level. But how are they going to progress inside the organization? How the hand holding can be done, how the upskilling can be done, that is taken care of. And it's merit based, it's not based on gender. So intersectionality is tackled in a more case to case basis rather than gender based or kind of disability based, because each disability type could be unique, and gender obviously is something which we take care of. So
Yeah.
that's the take of the organization, that reasonable accommodation is the answer to all, being an inclusive organization.
No, yeah, yeah. You see this broad smile on my face is when you're saying we're 80% compliant, but we are still not there. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking the more I know how much I don't know, kind of a situation here it is. But this is a lot of work happening in that area. So we heard that, and Melina, so TVS is doing all this in the disability space, and I'm from your perspective at Northern Trust, what initiatives what have been your initiatives in terms of women in the space of mental health and well-being?
So, our initiatives on mental health and well-being, Navdeep, are largely gender agnostic, because whenever we talk about mental health, everyone has mental health, and we take care of our mental health just like we take care of our physical health. So I think what we first did, and I'll bring in the gender and intersectionality element in some of my examples, we wanted to challenge the stigma around mental health, which is still so strong. People are reluctant to talk about it. So we came up we worked with an external organization called Mitra Trust. We came up with this campaign with animals, and we didn't want to use human beings because then we would have gendered he, she. Women have more anxiety, men are more prone to suicide and
Right.
depression, etc., etc. So these
Yeah.
four animal characters come up as friends, and every week they meet to discuss different aspects of mental health. So we ran this campaign. It was a poster campaign, which ran for 16 months, phase one and phase two. The first phase was talked about common mental health conditions like stress, anxiety, and depression. And the second phase talked about positive psychology. So, how do we leverage resilience, kindness, gratitude, and forgiveness to tackle our own mental health? Now, when we shared this story, interestingly, we had a large number of women come up to us and say, today I feel like animal A, today I feel like animal C. So there was a term of endearment with these
Yeah.
characters. And with that endearment came an endearment for the campaign and an endearment for a conversation on mental health,
Hmm.
which led us to our second example. So we adopted a campaign which is run by Barclays globally called "This Is Me," where we encourage people to share their own stories of lived mental health experiences. And we had quite a few employees. We had a trans woman who had just joined us talking about her journey with gender dysphoria and her mental health experiences. And you say double the trouble when you have twins, it's double the struggle here when you have intersectional identity and you're dealing with mental health. Similarly, we had a woman who was divorced, a single mother, and a woman who just got out of a difficult relationship share their "This Is Me" stories. And if you look at the comments, how many of them said, "I can resonate with this"? So that was a measure of success for us, the power of sharing stories, because storytelling is powerful. It sort of tackles some aspects of the brain
Yeah.
that leads to a deeper emotional connect. It also helps to describe some aspects of mental illness that are difficult to understand, and it also tells us in a collectivist society like Asia and in India that we're not alone when we share our experiences. So, storytelling with intersectionality was the second experience that I wanted to share. And we also had a number of expert led sessions. So, we kicked this off by inviting a woman psychologist, a leading psychologist from NIMHANS, or the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences,
Yeah.
where she spoke about what women go through from the time they're little girls to the time maybe they experience menopause and then old age, and how mental health affects them differently along that life cycle. And then the men said, look, it impacts us too. So for International Men's Day, we got to say another psychologist talk about how mental health impacts men as well. Okay, bringing in again the intersectional piece of what we do. And we've had a number of expert-led sessions on different topics, like post the pandemic, coping with grief and loss. Many people
Yeah.
lost friends or parents during the pandemic. And with all of these expert sessions, we want to bring the heart to the story. So we invite our employees to come in and share their personal experience. So you hear from an expert, and you hear from the employee. So I would say the expert-led sessions, the "This Is Me" storytelling campaign, the campaign with characters, and it was largely because our workforce is pretty. We've got about 70% millennials and 20% Gen Z. We wanted something that would hit the pulse with the crowd. So these are some of the ways that we brought mental health conversations to life. And yeah, these are the examples that I wanted to share. Thank you.
Yeah, and Melina, given how you said, so much stigma is attached to the mental health topic in this part of the world, and having characters which are animals, such a brilliant idea that although I identify with that animal, but it does not characterize me. So that was a really beautiful campaign, in my opinion. Yeah. So, I hear we're doing so much work in under intersectionality that we try and see how we can address each intersectionality, each identity of one person. And Jyotsna, if you could share as to while the organizations are trying to make this dent of addressing all the identities of their employees, do you see any concern that the organizations need to guard against from the organizational perspective?
Sure, Navdeep. So, first of all, I want to say that we don't need to prove that we need diversity, because it's a proven case that this is the need of the hour. If you want innovation, if you want success around bringing new ideas and creating an ecosystem where everybody can contribute and build towards the future, diversity has to be there. So that's a definite take that we need. But at the same time, uh, you know, when it comes to getting the right talent, when you want somebody, a number is given to drive being HR, I'm speaking. So when a
Yeah.
number is given to the talent acquisition team that, okay, we want diversity of this kind, this percent, definitely the team will try, but getting talent at times, like I know from PWD, white collar employment is a challenge for us, because these employees education levels is something we are struggling to fight for. It's a talent which is very, very scarce. At the same time, women who are mid level to senior level, it's very, very difficult to get them. But at the same time, the challenge comes when the teams at times try to put two tick marks for one single individual. So there could be, a female candidate who is also matching up with another kind of disability, maybe a PWD. So is the organization hiring because they are going to put two ticks over it? That's a challenge. And that's where we have to be cautiously tackling it, cautiously taking it forward, and maybe not fall for that trap, because that's a trap which is very easy to fall for. But cautiously taking a call on not falling for it is something which I would suggest everyone to be fair in their practices from that point of view.
Beautiful, beautiful. So it's not like you get one person and that tokenism that we keep talking about in DEI space, that it's not a tick mark activity, it's the value that you bring. That is what we need to guard against. All right. So we have these policies and we have these steps being done, which the organizations are taking. And Pallavi, if you can share that, there are times that people want to do good, they really want to be allies, but they don't know how. Do you have any suggestions that you can give those individuals, and maybe today who are watching us, who are in the audience today, some steps that they can take if they want to be allies and advocates for women who are standing at the intersectionality of various identities?
Absolutely. And I think, it there are, like, a lot of very simple things like everybody is aware of, but we just need to remind ourselves, like, we speak up when we see discrimination, as an ally, and we, how can we amplify, say, more voices of the underrepresented, um, background, equal pay. I think, fighting for those things, and we think these things are very, I think, simpler, and also people have started to take notice. But the two most important things that I feel are, that we can, focus on, are also, number one is educating ourselves, and I think this is what also we are doing some today, and the examples that Melina and Jyotsna you shared were, like, so eye-opening, like, in terms of how you are, how we are actually looking at these intersectionalities. Are we even aware of those? And one of those, which I am currently studying, is also the intersectionality with the caste marginalized, and especially women. And they really, really, and this was a lot of interesting information that in our country we have sort of put on the side. It's an uncomfortable topic and conversation, and not many corporates are talking about it, but I think it very much exists even in the urban India. And how are we really educating ourselves? What could be those? And I think just this education around like what could be those microaggressions, which unknowingly like we are putting out there. Like I shared some of my examples before. Like I think that education is really important. Educating yourself, like not just rely on your organization to always do that for you, but really find out more about the LGBTQ groups, the caste marginalized people from the people with disability, like what challenges they actually face, and especially if they are women. I think that they are at the most disadvantaged position. I think that is number one. And number two, which I always also feel like organizations can do more, or even as if we are leaders, like we can do more. So like I said, in my role of for talent development, I have been part of a lot of these women in leadership programs that we create for women to grow in the organization. But are we also looking at not just having mentors but sponsors? And sponsorship looks a little different from mentorship. It is about ensuring that you are actually removing obstacles for that woman, whatever it takes, for them to succeed. And that is what is, I think, also something that we can really take as an action. And if, as an ally, you are a woman, and I would say the first thing that you need to do is just unabashedly support other women. I think we don't do that enough. Like I think we just need to sometimes do a blindly support, because that is, and in small little things, in our everyday things, like how can as we as women leaders who are coming back. So one of the biggest gaps that I have seen in organizations when if I'm a woman leader and a person in my team has gone for maternity leave, I mean, thanks to the policies, we do have a 6 month, maternity leave period. But how are we bringing them back into the organization? Is still, I think, lots of work to be done there in terms of just sensitizing the people around us. How do we really, really support and give them that comfort to come back? And that's because that's where the leakage is, right? In the pipeline, like we say, we do need to look at that. And I think if you are a woman leader and you're listening to this, I think the first one ally support that you need to give is just whether you have been a mother or not, put yourself in their shoes and just think about what kind of support they would need, and just ensure that they continue their journey, because that is the most crucial time for us to be able to retain women.
Thank you, Pallavi. Yeah, yeah. So empathy being the operational word here. That although I may or may not have walked that path, but having the empathy that what the person is going through. Thank you, thank you. And so we have what organizations can do and what individuals as allies can do. So this brings me to a futuristic question, and this is to both Melanar and Jyotsna. First, Melanar, as to what do you envision as the future of workplace, which is inclusive of all women, and what roles can individuals, organizations, HR professionals uh, play in achieving this particular vision that you have for the future?
So thank you, Navdeep, for that question. There's a lot that can be said to that.
Yeah.
But I want to keep it really, really crisp. And my 3 points that I want to include in this vision. The first one is I'm waiting with bated breath for that day when someone calls our women leaders leaders and drops the women in front of that leader. You are a leader, not a woman leader. Because, and I've seen many women who have tried to sort of embrace the male leadership style without bringing their authentic leadership style. And I'm sorry to say, have failed miserably and have earned enemies in that process. And I've seen women who are nice, bringing in their own leadership style, that are some of the best role models that I've worked with in my entire career. So, my first thing that I envision, my dream, is to say, you're a leader and not you're a woman leader, right? You embrace that leadership for who you are, not because you're a woman, quote unquote. I think the
Yeah.
second thing I would vision is we talk about allies, men as advocates, we need more men, he for she, etc., etc. I
Mm.
strongly believe and I hope that more women would support other women in the organization. And I want to share a quote from Madeleine Albright, the former US Secretary of State and UN Ambassador. And she said this, and I think she said this when she was supporting Hillary Clinton's campaign. She says, there's a special place in hell for women who don't support other women. Okay?
Yes.
So every time I listen to that, it reminds me, and reminds all of us as women, what we need to do to support other women, women who report to us, women who we work with, even our
Yeah.
domestic help at home, and even women in our neighborhood. And
Mm.
finally, for the future, I want to talk about the need to do something for women that may not come from similar backgrounds, like the four of us talking on this call. You know, this is a very sort of a corporate focused conversation. But what can we do with a multitude of women out there? The women experiencing change due to climate crisis, right? We all know that climate change impacts women differently. How can we support them? Yeah. What can we do? I'm not talking about philanthropic efforts to go and educate 100 girl children, not at all. What can we do
Yeah.
to sort of educate and rehabilitate not just women, but even women from the trans community or even women with disabilities? Or, and if my dream comes true, having more women from the armed forces working with us. Yeah. So really about women from all strata of society, bringing them into the workforce. These would be my three things I would hope for in a futuristic workplace. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And Jyotsna, quickly from your side,
Sure.
what is your vision?
Really, Melina, I think you spoke it all. I just want to add here, uh, I think majority of the D&I roles today are performed by women. So I would like to see futuristically males also getting into D&I, males also taking up these roles. Many of them are there, but I don't see too many though. At the same
Mm.
time, I think organization and the society and the overall ecosystem entrusts a lot on us by creating a role like this in the organization, because there is a vision to drive them, there's a vision to move it forward and take people forward along with, where I think HR fraternity, people who are performing these roles are actually the catalyst. Their role is more of to influence things and ensure that the progression continues to happen. And that's where I think moving forward, I would like to see more men in these roles. I would like to see more futuristically more diverse workforce coming into and taking up these roles. Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And I'm looking at the questions, and and this tells me that this has been a very beautiful and engaging conversation. I have a couple of questions there, and I'm looking at the time, so I will quickly dive into the questions so that we're able to answer a few of them. And the first question that is there is, what is the business case? Or how can we convince leadership that there is merit to make changes to traditional employee policies, especially when it involves cost? So, Melanie, do you want to take this? Or oh, this is Anushka Rele. She wanted to ask that. Melanie or Jyotsna, anybody, Pallavi?
I will take that.
Sure.
So, business case definitely, as I think I had mentioned already, that diversity and inclusion does not need a business case.
Yeah.
Recently, we launched menstrual leave policy for women inside of the organization. Yes,
Yeah.
there is cost involved because over and above everybody else's leave, you are giving 1 day additional off to women employees. But how do you strengthen your case is definitely something you have to come up with a back end story. So, being a D&I professional, when I approached this subject, I couldn't do it alone. I had to work with a cross functional team where we had to identify, especially, how the attendance of men versus women is looking like, what is the backup we need in case, how much percentage of women futuristically anticipating a hypothetical number that on a specific day, if 1% of women are not available, then how we do a backfill for them. So I'm just giving you a situation and a scenario to make a realistic situation that whenever you approach a subject, cost will be involved, but you have to go prepared with your story, that how these comparisons can be established. And I think organizations are pretty open to investing some costs, because the kind of innovation and the kind of cost benefit they see at the end of it, they're open to
Yeah.
looking at it.
Yeah, yeah. No, beautiful. Thank you, Jyotsna. Right, right. And the next question that I have is, I I'd love to learn more about how you're engaging and empowering your ERGs to create sustainable value for both the group members and the organization.
So I think
Melina, do you want to take this?
yeah, I
Thanks.
think I
Yeah.
can take that.
Yeah.
We so I call the ERGs my adopted children. Okay. So the thing is with the ERGs, it's not just about giving them funding and say go do what you want. So one thing that we stopped our women's ERG doing is celebrating International Women's Day with all the boys giving the women in the teams roses. That is banned. And they can't use pinks and blues in their communication. That is also banned. I know banned is a very strong word. But what we ask them to do is look at the work they do with the lens of what can they do for our people, what can they do to foster a culture of inclusion, and what can they do to impact our communities and build our brand externally. Okay, so since we're talking about women and intersectionality, I'll give you an example. So what can the women's network do? So we, like many other organizations, we have a returnee program. So the women's network, building a mentoring initiative for the women who've joined us through the returnship program. We also had a speed networking event. I mean, you hear the word speed, you think of speed dating, and that like got everyone's attention. Wow, what's this? What's this about? And we got some of our women employees, the younger ones, to interact with the more senior leaders. They also had a networking event where we had senior leaders talking about the power and possibilities of networking. And that's what we do for our people. From a culture perspective is how do we engage our male allies as advocates? So we had a fireside chat with some men talking about how they've supported women at the workplace and beyond to drive gender equality. And finally, what can we do in our communities? When we get our women's network to represent our organization externally, build our brand as an employee that supports women at the workplace, or even do something for women and the girl child in our communities. So we ask them to come up with their strategy that is linked to our DNI strategy, that has a business case and is linked to the business strategy, not just to any random thing. And that gives the ERGs a lot of power. We reward and recognize them during the appraisal season. We recognize them throughout the year with rewards. So there's power and purpose in doing this role. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Meliner. Thank you very much. And this will be the last question that I think we will be able to take. And this, I think, Pallavi, comes your way. How can women, especially those at the intersection of multiple marginalized identities, find mentors and allies to support their professional growth?
Yes, and I think there are some wonderful ideas just that Melina spoke about that you can also suggest to your organization. I love the whole speed networking idea and having these different avenues to be able to really get support and mentorship. And but I also believe that as a part of your professional development conversation with your leader, it is something that we should demand for. And this as an employee of the organization, showing interest in your own growth and professional development can only be encouraged. So I would probably say that ask for it, and with a reason why you are asking for it. somebody that you can share your story with, and share about your intersectionality of how there are so many different aspects to you, and you would probably need a little more additional support or a specific kind of support to grow in the organization. And personally, I mean, that has been my experience as well. If I have ever wanted a mentor or like a sponsor, go and ask for it, is what I would say. But happy if there is any other suggestion from Eleanor or Jyotsna on this as well.
Yeah, and anything, I know this is an engaging conversation and we would like to continue this conversation, but in the interest of time, thank you very much. And it's been an honor to have this conversation with you, Jyotsna, Melenar, and Pallavi. Thank you for sharing your experiences, and thank you for a very beautiful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for hosting us.
Thank
Thanks a lot.
you.
It was very
Yeah.
enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you.